In this video, we're going to be talking about the decline of the retail industry and how Maidstone has gone from being one of the best town centres in Kent to being a really bland, miserable and forgettable place. So many shops have shut down in recent years, and in just 5 years it's gone from being one of the best places to one of the worst. Such a big change in such a short space of time. So why has this happened in Maidstone? And why is this happening in town centres across England? Well, let's take a look. So, Maidstone. It is the county town of Kent, the capital of Kent. It's where the council offices are located. And this is what a town looks like. It's a fairly well-sized town. We've got over here the railway, Maidstone East, which has the main line to London. Over here it crosses over this little branch line. It has very little traffic on it and it's quite a run-down branch line. It's quite interesting. And that goes to Maidstone Barracks and Maidstone West. Then if we look over here, near where, well, I would say the High Street, although the street is more like a High Street, is actually called Week Street. And the street as technically the High Street isn't really the High Street. So this is what's called a High Street, but the actual High Street where the shops are is Week Street, which is this street. And now at the end of this street is the council offices here. That's your council offices and magistrates court. And then behind the magistrates court is the prison. That's right, in the town centre, almost on Week Street, almost on the main shopping street, is a prison. Where else in the UK do you see a prison on the main shopping street? That is so weird. It's quite an eyesore really, having this great big prison right in your town centre. And if you're near this prison, you'll notice fairly regularly there's drones flying over the prison to deliver the drugs to the prisoners. You would have thought if you're in prison, you would have no way of getting drugs. Well, that's not the case. In fact, if you're in this prison, you've got more easy access to drugs than what you would have if you weren't in prison. This prison is famous for it, famous for all its drone deliveries of drugs going over, and all of the prison staff turn a blind eye to it. Oh well, that's what Maidstone's like. So let's now go along to the main shopping street. And let's see what's happened and how this decline of the retail industry has happened. First thing is this office building. Like loads of office buildings throughout the country, this office building has been turned into flats. This is a common story throughout the country. This is what it looked like before I put up the scaffolding. Then the scaffolding went up and they've converted it into flats. This is because offices are in decline. This happened even before coronavirus. People wanted offices less and less. And now coronavirus has happened, loads of people have moved to working from home, and as coronavirus has finished, people continue to want to work from home, meaning offices are completely in the decline. As offices decline, there's less footfall in the town centre. And as there's less people needing to go into the town centre, this means there's less people going to the shops. This means the only people going to the shops in the town centre are people who have specifically chosen to come to the town centre, rather than necessarily people just passing through to go to work. This means there's less people in the town centre. This then means shops shut down because there's less demand for shops. As shops shut down, there's even less demand for people to come to the town centre, meaning it's an exponential decline in retail. And that's what's been going on a lot. And that isn't the only reason. The other reason why retail is declining is because high street shops just aren't good enough. They're not big enough. Now, retail has moved to online a lot. Online, on the internet, you get stuff a lot cheaper than you do in the shops. And that's made people not want to buy stuff in shops. People want to buy all their stuff online because it's cheaper. But there are certain things where you really do need to see the stuff you're buying before you buy it. Like clothes shopping online can be a nightmare, and there's still a merit to actually going into a shop to buy clothes. So the amount of retail that still does exist in person and not online often can still happen in the town centres, but a lot less of it. But as well as that, there's another issue with the town centre, is the shops just aren't big enough. So the remaining retail that still does happen in physical shops that isn't online now happens more in retail parks than it would do in a town centre, simply because retail parks have better shops. When I say better, I mean bigger shops. Bigger shops with more demand, such as this retail park shop. Just take a look at it. It's fucking ugly. Horrible, nasty little shed shops that are like no character to them whatsoever, but we all shop in them, including me. I hate retail parks. They're ugly, but they've got more choice in a town centre. And parking quite often is free. When in a town centre, you have to pay extortionate prices. So, There's less footfall in town centres, a lot of people are moving online, and the amount of retail that still does get done in physical shops now gets done in retail parks rather than the town centre. And all of those three things put together means town centres are very much in decline. So we now move back to Maidstone Town Centre. We're going to take a look at exactly what's gone on over the years. So we now go down this way, down along to where McDonald's is. And there's this shop here, Sue Ryder. It used to be Blockbuster. This picture's down in 2009. A lot of the shops of the high street have closed down over the years. Blockbuster was obviously going to fail because you've got Netflix and there's other ways to watch movies. Who goes into a rental shop and rents a movie? It's such an old-fashioned thing. Obviously, Blockbuster was going to go bankrupt. There's nothing really that can be said about that. But it does mean there's less shops in the high street. And replacing Blockbuster, which is quite a popular shop, is Sue Ryder, a less popular shop. The problem is, as shops do shut down and shops take their place, the shops that take their place often have less traffic to them than the previous shop. And that is another thing that adds to the decline. Over here, you've got KFC. Over here, you've got this shop. I am interested to know what this shop is, because look, that's quite posh. And if you look at that little shithole at the bottom of it, obviously that shop's not built for that. That would have been built for something interesting at some point. I wonder what it was originally. That has not been wherever that is for a long time, so I don't know what that was originally. So let's go down here beyond McDonald's. And we've got Maplin. Back in 2000 whenever it shut down, if we go to 2014, we can see it's Maplin. Maplin went bankrupt for obvious reasons. Maplin sold electronic components. And if you think about how cheap electronic components are, like a resistor, say, costs like 0.1p maybe, 0.2p. Resistors are cheap. Electronic components are cheap. Now, shops in the high street have a problem. They sell their products at higher prices than the actual going rate for a product. Usually like 50% higher price, or in some cases in the crapper shops, 100% higher price. Maplin's were selling their stuff for more like 500% higher price to 1,000% higher. Because if you think how cheap an electronic component is, and they were like selling a pack of like 10 LEDs for like £2 or something like that. That is a stupid price. 10 LEDs, that should be like 50p or something, and they're selling them for a couple of pounds. Ridiculous. The markups they were charging is stupid for electronic components. But their shops were useful, simply because you go in a shop and it'd be so much interesting stuff to take a look at. So loads of people were sad when Maplin's went bankrupt because their shops were so interesting, but who would actually buy stuff from Maplin's? Plus, they charged you money to buy the catalogue. What shop charges for the catalogue? Shops give out their catalogue for free because they want you to buy the stuff in it. And Maplin's charged for it. So stupid. Over there we've got Tesco. Oh, and then we've got over here the Army and Navy shop. Now this is one that's interesting. This shop, I think, disappeared in a long time ago. It's when a Fremlin Walk got built. It disappeared. So I think I was very young at the time. I can barely remember this shop. It was one of these classic old style department stores. It's really interesting. Disappeared. Got brought out by House of Fraser, moved down to Fremlin Walk when Fremlin Walk opened. So obviously that went bankrupt because let's face it, Army and Navy. What kind of name is that? Like in retail, you want names to make people go in the shop and buy stuff. And Army and Navy makes most people want to run away from a mile from it. Terrible name, but a classic old department store. And this Army and Navy shop had a new Otis lift put in because it didn't actually have a lift previously. It just had a goods lift. And this new Otis lift was put in less than a year before the shop shut down. Oh dear, a brand new lift that was installed like less than a year before the shop went. What a waste of money. After Army and Navy shut down, it became Morrison's for a little while, but Morrison's didn't last long and they then shut down. It then became My Local, wherever the fuck that is. They didn't last, they shut down. So this shop's not really had any good tenants, really. It's been doing very badly for having good tenants. Over here you got more shops. You get loads of these pawnbroker shops. That's really another sign of the times of, horrible. Now if we head up here, we've got an absolute classic shop I need to talk about. This shop, which is C&H Fabrics. The earliest picture I've got on Google Street View is 2014 after C&H Fabrics shut down, and what the fuck is sweets and treats? Ugh, sounds horrible. C&H Fabrics was an absolute classic. A complete classic. Their shops were so old-fashioned. You could walk into a C&H Fabric and it was like going back in time to like the 50s or something, where people used to make their own clothes. It's like going back to the Second World War. Make do and mend. Make your own clothes because there's no clothes in the shops. Well, obviously there is clothes in the shops and no one really makes their own clothes. So that shop was obviously in decline and was obviously going to go bankrupt. It's a real shame because I love this shop. It was so old-fashioned and a glass lift in a little tiny shop, only ground 1 and 2, a little tiny sort of 50s looking shop. And in the 80s, this glass lift got installed. That is a nice feature for a little tiny shop. You don't see little shops having nice features nowadays, unless the feature was from a long time ago, like in a new small shop. They don't put in nice features now because there's less pride in the shop. This is actually an 80s Stanner hydraulic lift, a very nice little classic lift. Back when Stanner was good. So they are gone. What's it now? It's now Burger King. And what's happened to the lift? It's now gone. The lift shaft's now empty and they've removed the shaft on the ground floor. Such a shame. Poor 80s Stanner. You've got more shops. Well, Subway went bankrupt. Well, some of these shops come and go so quick nowadays. Now we go over to Primark. And another interesting thing to talk about the decline of retail is how shops are not big enough in town centres. So as well as the fact you have to pay for parking, you get tiny shops. Now back in the 90s, this would be considered a good sized shop. It's not good size in the modern day. People need choice. If you walk into a shop, it's just not enough stuff. It's not enough choice. People want good big shops. Now in some high streets, what happens is the shops join together to make a big shop. Now if you see at Primark there, then you've got that shop there. I think it used to be Woolworths. Could those two shops join together to make a bigger Primark and make an adequately sized shop? Well, no, they couldn't, because you've got a little Superdrug in the middle. So some places you've got two big shops next to each other. They do merge together to create bigger and better shops. But most of the time in high streets, it's just not possible because of the building layout, meaning you're stuck with these tiny, tiny shops. Well, tiny in the modern day term of it, because it's too small for modern day. Who would go to this Primark when you could just go to any other Primark for free in a retail park and have a much bigger and better shop? That's why high streets are declining as well. The building layout of the high street is just not suitable for the remaining retail in the modern day. Then if we go down here, we've got, I believe that's Woolworths. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. It could be something else. I think this is Woolworths. It's now become a shoe shop there and has become Poundland. So many people I know of going to Poundland because they think it's cheap. Poundland's not cheap. Why does everyone think it's cheap? It's really overpriced. Everything's £1. Amazing value every day. And most of the stuff in it's worth less than £1, apart from a few little bits. Now, as for Woolworths, Woolworths went bankrupt because they didn't meet the demand of the time. They were still selling like CDs and stuff that people didn't want. In the modern day, Wilko's has pretty much taken over from Woolworths. They pretty much fill the exact same gap that Woolworths filled up, except Wilko's focuses more on the stuff people want, such as like little bits and pieces that people need for their houses, such as cleaning stuff and just everyday sort of stuff. When Woolworths was not focused on it enough, they were more of too much of a scattered everything shop, and that's why Woolworths sadly went bankrupt, which is a real shame because Woolworths was a very epic shop, so it's a real shame they went bankrupt. Now, talking about shops that aren't big enough, we've got Marks and Spencer's. Interestingly, Marks and Spencer's, I believe, might actually own their own shop. In the modern day, that's rare in retail. Certain shops like to be property owners, like Tesco's. They're a big property owner. They own, as well as Tesco's, they own the property of many other shops. They also own blocks of flats. They own flats above their shops. Tesco's is a big property owner as well as being just a shop. Normally, most shops nowadays don't own any of their stuff. They just rent it all. Marks and Spencer's, I believe, is still an owner. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you've got the Marks and Spencer's clock up there. Now, with the subject of shops not being big enough, Marks and Spencer's did one of the things that shops often do. They got two of them. Up there, we've got another Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer number 1. And up here, Marks and Spencer's number 2. Another example of this was Debenhams in Canterbury. There was actually 3 Debenhams in Canterbury. The problem is, splitting your shop over 3 shops means you get less footfall. Because in Debenhams in Canterbury, I believe there was main Debenhams, children's Debenhams, and houseware Debenhams. But the problem is a lot of houseware is sold for people passing through a shop and thinking, oh, I need one of those, and they just pick it up and buy it. So it works on footfall when the person is actually looking for something else. When you split up your shop, you don't get that footfall anymore. So it doesn't really work splitting up your shop in multiple shops. That is one way that shops sometimes do it in these sort of situations where they can't get big enough shops. Although Marks and Spencer's is failing because the clothing part of the shop, most people seem to not like it. And everyone I've spoken to, including young people, middle-aged people and old people, so everyone of all ages, all seem to agree that Marks and Spencer's clothing is outdated and crap. So Marks and Spencer's is failing. Although the other end of their business, because Marks and Spencer's is effectively two different lines of business, the other part's their supermarket part, and that's really popular. It's really overpriced. I can't afford it, but there is a demand for rich people buying overpriced food, or what they would call in their words, good quality food. So that end of Marks and Spencer's is really profitable. So what will happen to Marks and Spencer's in the future? It might need a revamp. Their supermarket end might need to get bigger, and their other end of Marks and Spencer's might need to get smaller. Now if we go over here, we've got Fremlin Walk, the new shopping centre of Maidstone. I was really disappointed when this was opened. I was a little tiny child. I was like, new shopping centre! Went along to the new shopping centre with my parents, really excited, and it's a fucking shopping street. They've built it so they could add a glass roof in the future. Because look at design, they could add a roof to that. Maybe they could add a roof and turn it into a real shopping centre and make it nice. But at the moment, it's horrible. Why was it back in the 2000s? In some places, like this popular thing of having shopping streets rather than shopping centres. Shopping centre is a million times better than a shopping street. What were they thinking of? There's a few shops in here. Didn't really work out as well as everyone hoped, really. Everyone was, I think it'd be like a major new shopping centre. It turned out to be a bit of a disappointment, really. So that's what Fremlin Walk looks like. If we go up to here in Fremlin Walk, at the end you've got the big department store, House of Fraser. Now there's another interesting thing to do with retail is Mike Ashley has brought out House of Fraser. So Mike Ashley is the owner of Sports Direct, and his business model is unusual but works for the moment. But will it work long term? That's another question. What Sports Direct does, and what Mike Ashley does, is he buys out as much as he possibly can. So in Sports Direct, he buys out loads and loads of failing brands. Sports Direct is all full of brands that were failing, brought out by Mike Ashley, and then rather than keeping the brand going of how it was originally going, he'd just use the name. Then you'd get loads of cheap stuff from China, like really cheap Chinese stuff, and put the brands he brought out and put their label onto the Chinese cheap stuff. So effectively, you get the illusion of choice. You go into a shop and you think, oh, there's loads of different stuff in this shop, when effectively it's just the same few cheap Chinese things branded as loads of different names. And it has been successful in Sports Direct, and he's using that business model now, not just on brands of goods, but on actual shops themselves. Because he's brought out House of Fraser, and he's slowly turning it into a mini Sports Direct. So in the town centre, you get Sports Direct selling cheap Chinese stuff, and you get House of Fraser selling similar, almost the same cheap Chinese stuff. It gives the illusion of choice, because effectively House of Fraser is now just another Sports Direct. Will this business model work, or will people start to think, hold on, it's all just the same things and the choice is just an illusion? It seems to work. So it doesn't work. It makes you think there's loads of different shops selling different things, even though they're all effectively the same. But as retail declines, Mike Ashley is a bit like a vulture, because he buys up all of the declining stuff and makes it work for a while, and if it fails he probably gets rid of it. In that sense, he's a bit like some of the Dragons and Dragons Den that do similar things, like HMV, another example of a failing shop. HMV is completely failing, but there is a demand that you can make some money by buying your failing shops, shutting down all the failing ones, and the ones that are still just about profitable, keeping them going well over profitable, and soon as they start to fail, which they're inevitably going to do because it is a failing shop, you then shut them down. So you like milk the remaining interest in your failing shop. Exact same thing happened in Jessop's. Jessop's is a failing shop. I think it's one of the Dragons Den Dragons brought it up and kept it going a little bit just to make a bit of last profit on it before it completely failed. That is very ruthless capitalism to do that, to buy a shop knowing that it's going to fail, but just to milk it while it still has a little bit of profit left in it. So if we now go out of Fremlin Walk, actually another shop has also obviously closed, Dory Firkins and Burton. That was owned by, I can't remember who it was a big retail company, it owned quite a few of these different shops. They also owned Top Man Top Shop, they owned a couple of others as well. They all went completely bankrupt. So that's actually another shopping chain, especially Top Man Top Shop, which was actually one of the brands of shop that was to some extent profitable. They also disappeared along with the rest of the company, because the rest of their shops like Burton and Dorothy Perkins weren't profitable, but sadly the entire thing's now gone, including the profitable end of it. So that means even less shops in the high street now, because I'm pretty certain that's disappeared because they went bankrupt. So the high street really is declining, and you get more and more crappy shops out of that. As the amount of rent goes down, there's less demand in the high street, rent goes down because there isn't the big shops for it, and you get these shitty things moving in, making the high street look like a complete shit show. Down here you've got this part that's called a high street. That used to be two separate roads. They've pedestrianised one of the roads fairly recently. Actually, down here's another little shopping centre in Maidstone. This one was more of like a little boutique centre. It's called The Star. I'm not sure if you're going to get a street view in that. There is The Star shopping centre. Let's see if there's any street view in there. Yeah, that's what it looks like. I wonder how that's going to go, especially with coronavirus, because coronavirus has really exaggerated the decline of retail. So the small shops that were barely profitable have just been wiped out because of coronavirus, because they just couldn't have survived the year and a half of restrictions and that. So the small little shops that were just about holding on while struggling have all gone bankrupt. So literally now in the modern day, it's just a few big shops. And these sort of very small sort of boutique shopping centres with tiny little shops. This place must be suffering like crazy. Also in Maidstone, another thing, this isn't shop related, this is something of my personal interest, which is lifts. Anyone that knows my YouTube channel knows I've got an interest in lifts. And down this street here, it used to be Express Lift Street. All been replaced. Star House, look at that. 30s building, I think this is listed, a classic listed 30s building. It had a classic express lift, which I believe was a 50s express rather than a 30s one, because it looks slightly more 50s. And that's been completely replaced, even though that lift was in perfect working condition. It worked perfectly. They could have kept it, but they've completely replaced it with an Otis generic brands Gen 2. The cheapest of the Gen 2s. The ones that got just two tiny little belt cables. Very weak lift car. The worst of the worst. Otis generic brands Gen 2. Disgusting lift. And it replaced a classic heavy duty express lift. Horrible. Over here, this place also had an express lift, has been replaced. Express lift land in Maidstone's gone. Down there, you had Marriott Scott, I think that has gone. Down here, you've had an express lift, I think in this shop, was it the next shop? Down, it wasn't a shop, it was like a little office building. That's not even been replaced, it's been stripped out and gone. Down here, you had an Otis Bitzer, a very sort of bodgy lift. It's Otis's bodge lift in like the late 70s, early 80s. One of their last ever relay lifts, the Bitzer, that's gone. So Express Lift Land in Maidstone, Maidstone's historic lift centre, where all the historic lifts are, has gone. So that gives you an idea of what I think of Maidstone. Actually, down here there used to be a classic car park. There was a Summerfields down here. There's obviously now Morrison's. That used to be a car park, a multi-storey car park, and that got pulled down. I find that messed up, considering that town centres charge for parking on the basis they don't have much parking, so they have to charge for it. Why then reduce the amount of parking by getting rid of a multi-storey car park? Although that car park was so grotty, like it's the grottiest car park of Maidstone. They could have put effort into making it nicer. Why would you replace a multi-storey with just a crap little tiny car park? So over here, we've got the Checkers Centre. Checkers Centre being the biggest shopping centre in Maidstone. It's owned by The Mall, which is a company that owns quite a few shopping centres. That's what it looks like. I've got a new shop front. It used to be like a 70s thing. Let's see the old shop front. There, that's the old shop front. Actually, I don't even think that's original, because that doesn't exactly look very 70s. Had old Otis lifts. They had Leicester mod, Pawn Dunwoody Leicester mod. Those are now being replaced into new Leicesters. Even though those lifts were working fine, they've now been replaced. So let's go into here. They have replaced the ceiling. This used to have a classic 70s looking ceiling. They replaced it with this ceiling. If they wanted to upgrade the centre, because it did look old, I liked it because I like 70s stuff, because I like old stuff. But they wanted to upgrade their shopping centre. They haven't done that good job at it. It doesn't look nice. It looks run down, and they've tried to make it look nice, but they haven't really done a good job at it. Well, I see at Christmas time, I have ridiculous Christmas decorations and stuff, and a weird Santa thing there. There's quite a few shops in this centre I like it have gone, like BHS, that had classic old Otis relay lifts. Why did BHS have to go bankrupt? BHS's shops looked amazing. BHS was like going back in time. You go in their shops and it'd be really, really dated. But there was too much of demand in the same shops, because you had Debenhams and BHS directly competing, and both of those shops were getting dated and both have gone bankrupt. The big department store is something that hasn't really worked out long term. People go into a shop specific for what they want. So if you want a clothes shop, you go in a clothes shop. If you want like a household shop, you go in a household shop. The whole concept of having a big department store selling different things has not worked in the modern day. Almost all of them have gone bankrupt. John Lewis, I think, might be the only surviving one. We got House of Fraser, but I'd barely count that now if this is another brand of Sports Direct. Will John Lewis survive? Well, that's a debatable question, considering that John Lewis is a form of a co-op, Although it's technically not a co-op, John Lewis works on a co-op basis where it's not a capitalist system. John Lewis is owned by its workers, so it's a really strange system, similar to how the cooperative co-op, the food store co-op, works. Will that system works? It doesn't work in cutthroat capitalism. It's brilliant for workers as a socialist sort of way of having really good morals. John Lewis and the cooperative work really well in that sense, but they can't compete without having that nasty sort of capitalist system driving down prices. Their prices don't really compete with other shops, so I do wonder what will happen to John Lewis in the future and whether it will survive. Talking of the cooperative co-op, they actually used to have a department store called Co-op Department Store. Those were classic old shops, absolutely vintage with old Pickering's lifts. Those all went bankrupt. Co-op Department Store was brilliant. I got all my stuff, most of the furniture in my house is from Co-op Department Store from the late 90s, and all the furniture in my house is still intact. Furniture from the late 90s from Co-op Department Store is still in great condition in the modern day. That is how well built Co-op Department Store furniture used to be. You won't find furniture lasting that long in the modern day. So in the Checkers Centre, sadly you've got a closed down BHS, you've got a Sports Direct shop which is like as grim as any other Sports Direct. Shopping centre's not doing that well really. You've got an incredibly grotty bus station. That is an extremely grotty bus station. It stinks of piss and it stinks of fox. Like foxes must go in there at night and poo all over it. Absolutely stinks of fox. Such a grim bus station. Considering that it was probably really modern when they built it. They can't give you things nice. There's a lift in this bus station that was absolutely filled with piss. They recently replaced it with Schindler. So they replaced this grotty lift with a Schindler, and less than 6 months after the lift was replaced, the lift was already vandalised and broken. So much vandalism in this bus station. The glass on the doors out to where the buses are is often all smashed up. Absolutely grim. It's the shithole of Maidstone. I think it pretty much sums up Maidstone. That sort of gives you an idea of how it's failing. With so many shops shut down, if we talk about how many shops are gone from Maidstone, you've got C&H Fabrics is gone, BHS is gone, Army and Navy, actually that turned into House of Fraser, but that's effectively gone because that's now just turned into an effective Sports Direct. You've got Woolworths is gone, although that one was quite a long time ago. You've got Maplin's is gone. You see how much it's declining? It's now a lot of little tiny shit shops have taken their place that don't cut it for the town centre. You have no reason to come into this town centre anymore if you actually want to do shopping. You might as well go to a retail park on the outskirts of town that has bigger shops. Like if you head up here, you've got a retail park that's currently kind of in development up in this area of Maidstone, where you've got Notcutter's Garden Centre there, which is like a garden centre. Then over here you've got Next at Home. That is a big homeware shop. So considering that entire building is just for homeware, it's not like a regular Next shop full of clothes, that's just like for furniture in your house and stuff. That's what people want. They want a big shop with loads of stuff to browse. And that's where people go to get their stuff. So town centres are failing. What will town centres look like in 10 years' time? I dread to think there's going to be more closures. Lot more closures, more of the last few remaining big shops. There's now just going to be full of tat shops. A town centre just full of tat shops will not survive. So what will happen to the town centre? They're all just going to turn into really gloomy shit shows like they're not, like it almost like it already. So town centre is going to be a thing of the past. They are failing. And Maidstone's failing really quicker than the others. So that's the end of the video. I hope you found this video interesting. Good idea,